going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Today I want to talk to you about a season of a TV show. I haven't talked about a TV show in a while, and so today I want to talk to you about American Gods Season 1. This is a Starz TV show that aired last year, I think, and I believe the second season will be coming later this year. And this is based on a novel by Neil Gaiman, and this is actually not my copy of this show. One of my supervisors at work one day asked me if I had ever read anything by Neil Gaiman, and I was like, yeah, I've read some comics that he wrote, but I haven't read any of the books that he wrote. And she said that she had read American Gods, and she really liked the book, and then this show came out, she really liked it, and so she let me borrow it, and knowing almost nothing about the book, other than it does involve some mythology based on the title of the book, I went into this almost completely cold, and my quick 1-minute non-spoiler review of this series is that it is very intriguing and very fascinating, and I believe once the show is completely done, it's going to be a very fascinating series, and it's going to be one of the better shows out there. But just looking at this season, I'd have to say that most of this is just setup. And I say that as someone who has never read the book, and I don't really know where this show is going. I don't know if it's going to go off in its own direction, or if it's going to stay pretty true to the book. My supervisor did say that it is pretty true to the book, but I haven't read it, so I don't know just how true it is. But looking at this, it feels like they are putting the pieces on the chessboard, but they haven't actually started the game yet. And that's to be expected, because this season is only 8 episodes long. If you look at any other show that is very heavily arc-based, like Heroes from about 10 years ago, or Lost from about 10 years ago, if you look at just the first 8 episodes of either of those shows, they are not going to go very far in the overall story that they were working with in those shows. You look at the first 8 episodes of Heroes, it's going to be a whole lot of setting these characters up, and they almost start to meet each other in those first 8 episodes, but they're not going to defeat Cywar and save the world in the first 8 episodes. And I feel like maybe that was a problem here, in that they are telling a story, and they very clearly know what they're doing because they already have the blueprint with the novel, but they're only telling part of the story here. They're only setting things up. They're not really even telling any of the story yet. And I'm very fascinated with these characters. I'm very fascinated with the mythology that's being built here, but it's such a slow burn that I'm wondering if there are other people out there who are watching the show and they don't know where it's going, or they have even less of an idea than I do, and I had very little of an idea, and they're watching this and they're getting frustrated that nothing happens in this first season other than we're getting set up with all these characters. And there are a lot of characters, a lot more than what I was expecting. We got several actors here that I was like, hey, it's that guy, or hey, it's that girl. We've got the woman who is the essence of Easter. She was in Pushing Daisies, which was another Bryan Fuller show. Bryan Fuller was one of the co-showrunners of this season, and unfortunately, he won't be back for Season 2, so I'm hoping that whoever they get to run Season 2 is going to kind of have the same visual taste that Bryan Fuller has, but he brought her from Pushing Daisies. I'm assuming that he's the reason that she was here. There was also a minor actress who ran the Crocodile Bar. She was actually in an episode of Pushing Daisies, and I believe she's one of Bryan Fuller's kind of go-to actresses that he works with. And then we also have that Stormare guy who was in the Fargo movie, and then we have this chick here. She was in A Series of Unfortunate Events, the movie, and she's probably my favorite character in this. Her name is Laura. I should go ahead and say, spoiler warning ahead, if you have not seen the show, if you have not read the book, I am going to be spoiling this season quite a bit here. So anyway, the premise here is that we have this guy, Shadow Moon. He is in prison, and right before he is about to be let out for good behavior, his best friend and his wife die in a car accident. And then he finds out that they were cheating on him, and so he has nothing left from his old life, and so he goes to work for a guy named Mr. Wednesday. And we find out at the very end of the season that Mr. Wednesday is a god. Actually, it's pretty heavily hinted that he's a god earlier in the season, but we specifically find out that he is Odin at the very end of the season. And not to toot my own horn or anything, but I figured that out pretty early on. There are some very not subtle clues in the first episode. At one point he says, I have my eye on you, just the one eye. And also at the beginning of the season, we get like this 5 or 10 minute sketch about these Vikings who came to America, and then they ended up having to, almost all of them died before they were finally able to leave America, and they built a statue to Odin while they were there. And so we get that little bit about Odin, and then we meet Mr. Wednesday later. He mentions that he has the one eye on Shadow, and then at one point later on, he says, what day is it? It's Wednesday. Okay, well, it's my day. And then they call him Mr. Wednesday. Well, in Norse mythology, Odin was sometimes called Woden, and Wednesday was Odin's day, just like Thursday is Thor's day. So I was able to figure out that it was Odin, not to toot my own horn or anything, but anyway, Ian McShane from Lovejoy, which is a show that I watched a little bit when I was a kid, he's here, and I always love Ian McShane. No matter what he's in, I always love him. He does great here. He is able to pull off a certain charm, even though on paper he would be very unlikable, because Shadow is basically asks him like 100,000 times, what is going on? Why do you need me to work for you? And Mr. Wednesday basically just says, no, I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to let you kind of enjoy the ride. So anyway, basically, Mr. Wednesday, he's Odin. He is trying to gather some of the old gods who have basically been forgotten by humanity, and he wants to start up a war with a bunch of new gods. Not to be confused with Orion or Steppenwolf or any of those guys from DC Comics, but new gods who have shown up on Earth. And there's a few of them in this season. There is Mr. World, played by Crispin Glover. There is Media, played by Gillian Anderson. And then there's this other guy, Technology Boy or Mr. Technology, and I don't know who plays him. And anyway, basically they are opposed to Mr. Wednesday. And I don't really know why, and that's part of the problem with this season, is that a lot of this is just set up, and by the end, we've established our conflict, but I don't entirely know why all of the players in this conflict are doing what they are doing. Mr. Wednesday, I guess, wants humans to remember him and the old gods that they have forgotten. Okay, I kind of understand that. I do not understand why Mr. World and Media and Mr. Technology are against Mr. Wednesday in doing what he's doing. They are fighting some war, but I don't know why these guys don't want the old gods to be remembered again. It seems like they're kind of opposed to that. They're trying to stop them from doing what they're doing in various ways. At one point, Mr. Wednesday and Shadow Moon, they rob a bank, and then I'm assuming Mr. World is responsible for sicking the police on these guys. I don't know why he does that. At one point, he tries to ask Shadow Moon and Mr. Wednesday to join them, and both of them are kind of like, no thanks. In fact, even before he asks, he himself asks them to join, Media asks Shadow to join her. So it very clearly seems like these guys do not want Mr. Wednesday to do what he is doing, and I don't know why. I don't know why there can't be room for all the gods to be remembered by people. I don't know if maybe Media, who is like the god of technology, or rather the god of, I guess, a certain kind of technology, and then the Technology Boy. I don't know why these guys, maybe they're thinking that if Mr. Wednesday puts himself out there and everyone starts worshiping Odin again, then they won't be worshiping them. That's the only thing that I can think of, but I don't know if that's a good enough explanation, because you look at any pantheon, Greek, Norse, Roman, there were like dozens of gods, and right now we have like 4 or 5 of them in this world, so I don't know why humanity couldn't worship Mr. World and also worship Mr. Wednesday if they could all just hug each other and get along. But anyway, basically this entire season is Mr. Wednesday trying to recruit allies against these other guys, and it's a very slow burn, but it gives us a chance to get to know these characters, so I'm hoping, knock on wood here, I'm hoping that in Season 2 we can kind of just get right into the meat of the story, and we don't have to spend as long setting things up as we did in this season. And we got some other stuff that's not really tied to the whole Mr. Wednesday war with the other gods. Again, huge spoilers here, but Shadow's wife comes back to life through a series of kind of contrived events. Shadow is given a special coin by a leprechaun, and then Shadow leaves the coin on her grave. It brings her to life, and then the leprechaun is like, hey, I want my coin back, and so he teams up with her, and then they are trying to find a way to bring her back to life so that he can get his coin back. Along the way, they meet this Middle Eastern guy who has sex with a genie, and then he's looking for the genie. That subplot goes absolutely nowhere. There's this woman named Bilquis, I think is her name, and she has sex with people and then absorbs them, like they completely disappear when she has sex with them, and I guess she's one of the old gods, but she was kind of rejuvenated by the Technology Boy, and then at the very end of the season he says that she is a canon, and he's just pointing her in a specific direction. So I guess he wants her to have sex with either Mr. Wednesday or Shadow. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but there's a lot of characters here, a lot of subplots. There's an entire episode that kind of focuses on Shadow's wife, Lara. That's the girl here from A Series of Unfortunate Events. There's an entire episode that focuses on her being brought back to life, and kind of we get to see what she was up to before she died and then what she was up to after she died. That's one of my favorite episodes, but it's an entire 1/8 of this season, and it takes away from getting to find out more about the main thrust of this season, which is this war that Mr. Wednesday is preparing preparing for. We spend an episode with Peter Stormare, and then also his wife is actually Cloris Leachman. I was kind of surprised to see her here. I always love her in everything I see her in. But then Mr. Wednesday is basically saying, like, I need you with me. He says, I don't really want to. And then he says, okay, if I play checkers with Shadow, if he wins, then I'll go with you. And then after an entire episode, eventually Shadow does win, and then we don't get to see him anymore. So, okay, is he going to be going, is he going to show up again later, or is he just kind of forgotten after we spend an episode with these guys? I feel like this is going to be a really great show, a really amazing series once all is said and done. But I cannot imagine watching this episode by episode, week to week, and then spending a year waiting for another 8 or 9 episodes. These are very short seasons that we're getting here, and I feel like we're not getting a whole lot of substance, at least in this season. I'm really hoping that season 2, now that we've introduced all the characters and a lot of the conflict, we can kind of just get into the actual story. I don't know, but I think that would be really good. Overall, I like this quite a bit. This does kind of feel like a Neil Gaiman thing. He was very interested in mythology when he was doing The Sandman, and we get to see that a little bit in the Eternals that he did at Marvel also. So I'm interested in this world. I want to see more. I just wish that they would actually give us something whenever they're giving us these seasons. Don't give us something that's so padded out and lacking in a lot of substance. There's also a lot of stuff here that I had no clue what was going on. There's a lot of characters that I did understand what was going on, and it was all just kind of very slowly leading to something. But then there's stuff like the embodiment of death. We see him claim somebody, and then later he tries to claim Laura, but then she's sucked back to Earth. And then later we see him, he's with this author who, at the very beginning of the series, we see him, he's the one writing about the Vikings, and then at one point he's writing about Anansi, and we get to see Anansi talking to these almost slaves. They were kidnapped from Africa, and they were being brought to America, but then he's talking to them before they can be turned into slaves. And this guy, he's writing about all this stuff, but I have no idea who he is. Is he supposed to be the one who's writing the story of American Gods? Is he supposed to be another god, kind of like the embodiment of death? Because he knows what's going on. He's working with the embodiment of death, but I have no idea who he is. So I would really like for some of that to be cleared up if we do get more stuff in Season 2. So anyway, those are my thoughts on American Gods Season 1. Kind of a scatterbrained review because, let's be honest, this season was a little bit scatterbrained. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed this world. I enjoyed a lot of these characters. Really like the Leprechaun guy. I like Shadow. Like Mr. Wednesday, despite him being kind of untrustworthy, very untrustworthy. I like a lot of these characters. I just wish that we could get more story when we progress further into the series. So those are my thoughts on this season. I hope that you guys liked this review, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be back later in the week with another video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.